So hi, this is Frank Furness and welcome to the video today. Now, I spent many years as a successful financial advisor, traveled all over the world, and I've spoken to many groups, qualified top of the table many times. I've run two insurance brokerages, and one of my great friends, Anric Blatt, that I met originally in Hong Kong. We had some many good times together in Hong Kong. He's a superstar, but on the other side, with the fund management. Anric, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background briefly.
Well, thank you, Frank, for that advance warning. I really always appreciate being dropped in the boiling water there. Quick background, keep it very short. Founder and chairman of the Global Fund Exchange Group, which I started in 2005 as a dedicated emerging manager platform for what was then my multi-manager business, Infinity Capital AG, out of Zurich, Hong Kong, London, Tokyo, New York, with a back office in Christchurch, New Zealand. And then a few years ago, when I semi-retired from managing other people's money, because I actually realized I don't enjoy managing other people's money and I don't sleep at night, we transformed that business into a single family office. And then I built a consulting business with my wife, who's been in the industry, Laura Louise. She's been in the industry also for about 30 years. And we now help wealth and asset managers, transform their businesses into game-changing modern businesses that are hitting the ball out the park, So, Frank, enough about me a little bit. I suppose the only thing that's really important in all of this intro is, I normally kind of cringe when I have to talk about myself, but people say that that's all in your head because people actually really appreciate knowing who they're talking to. So the only thing that I think is important at this point is that I've done tens of thousands of interviews with asset managers, wealth managers, financial advisors. Thing you don't know about me, by the way, Frank, is that I started life as a financial advisor actually too. I was handed a yellow pages and a phone book and a phone and said, go make phone calls. And I sucked at it. So I had to reinvent myself and redesign it. So the other thing I think that's important to know is that I have failed way more times than I have been successful. And, in that process, you learn to dust yourself off and get up again and reinvent yourself. At the same time, I've had coaching and training from some of the biggest, best change agents in the world, people like Tony Robbins, Chet Holmes, Jay Abraham, Jim Rohn, Brendan Burchard, and Frank Furness, who I think does a wonderful job. A little bit of a shameless plug there. I think you are really doing a marvelous job with digital media and sales technology. So that's it on the intro. I live in Colorado and Florida with a bit of Cabo San Lucas and Italy in the equation. So right, back to you, Frank.
Our audience today is mainly going to be financial advisors, but I think this is relevant to anybody who's selling anything. Now, what you've done over the years is you've perfected that first appointment, the 10 steps to being successful. Tell me, what was your biggest sale that you've made on one of those appointments?
I've had a couple actually at 50 million, one at 100 million, and the best one I ever had was 125 million. That is a sale from one single meeting. And that was actually the whole background to all of this, Frank, is because in my coaching classes, in my consulting business, I teach fund managers, wealth managers to really transform that business. And I kept having this conversation with them about meetings. So one of them said, hey man, can't we record this, and can't you put a little presentation together on it? So as it happens, Frank said, man, I love this content, let's talk. So that's kind of why we're here.
Okay, so we're going to go right into it now. So Anric, tell us, what are those 10 killer steps for a great appointment?
Okay, and I hope that you're going to keep me on track, because I have a tendency to take a rabbit hole and go. I always start right at the beginning, and I think step number one for me is a little bit obvious, but I used to not do it. So all of these factors come out of my own mistakes, right? So number one for me was always to set my key intentions or my outcomes for the meeting right at the start, right? And even better is if you can write them down and send them in advance of the meeting, because it's actually better to be rejected before you get there, before you jump on a plane or charter a jet or spend 6 hours getting to a meeting if it's not a good fit. And I learned this from Oprah Winfrey, actually. She has a ritual that she does ahead of every single meeting, be it internally with her team or externally. She sits down and she goes, okay, what's our intention for this meeting? What's important? What matters here? And what are we trying to achieve? And that, I think, sets the framework. So that's point number one. Point number two, shall I continue?
Yeah, point two.
Okay, point number two is a mistake, is also something that I learned from my mistakes, is that you want to share the key information that will be needed before the meeting. Let me kind of explain that. And I think it comes from the old days where I was just given a phone book and I had to cold call people. And, some people are excellent at it. I was terrible at it. So I was so happy to get the meeting that somebody didn't hang up on me and insult me, that I got into this habit of just being so grateful for the meeting, right? So what I do nowadays is I share all the information that is needed before the meeting, because if you need to make a decision during that meeting, right, shouldn't the group that you're meeting with have all the information that they need ahead of time? So send documents, reports, everything that you need to the participants in advance, because holding a meeting just to share information, I think, is a terrible intention. It's unproductive. It wastes everybody's time. It's lazy, because great meetings result in decisions, right? The who, the what, the when, clear direction, clear accountability, clear time frames, right? And by having that discipline to send everything that is needed in advance of the meeting, you've kind of got no excuses but to run the rest of the meeting that you want to, right? So that's my point number two.
And with technology nowadays, you can send it easily, and you can even see if they've opened it and read it, so you know in advance how interested they are.
Yeah, and I've seen some of your videos on this. I think they're outstanding. I use a program called ClearSlide, because it actually comes with a virtual conference room, and I can see exactly who is looking at my stuff. And if they keep dropping off at slide number 13, I know that I need to make slide number 12 way more engaging, and I need to shorten it and all that kind of stuff. But that, Frank, brings me to my third point, which I suppose is something that you take for granted, because when I see your videos, they're so engaging and I so enjoy them because you are 100% authentic in your videos. And I really like that. Whereas most people that are kind of like in finance, we're all buttoned up in a suit and we're all pretending. And when we're kind of like young and starting out, we're trying to fake it till we make it and all this kind of stuff. And now at this kind of tender age of 50, as you see, I'm no longer in a suit and I cross my arms anytime I want to, because authentic is 1,000 times better than perfect. Let me explain that a little bit, because when you're too perfect and you're too coiffed and you're too prepared, everything seems like it's too clever or it's too engineered or whatever. And authenticity is the absolute key to connecting with people and allowing them to trust you and engage with you, you see, because if you're too perfect, they're just watching you the whole time and they're like, yeah, I'm not sure I trust this guy, you know what I mean? And just being authentic is so much better, because people get to see the real person. And even if you're weird or a little awkward like me, right, it's part of your shtick, and it allows you to be humble, number one. But the second thing is that you don't need to be so focused and nervous on saying the wrong thing. You just go and say it. And yes, half of my videos I have to edit afterwards and take out some curse words, but that's how it goes.
As a professional keynote speaker, I see that when I speak around the world, some of the speakers are so polished and so perfect, it's almost as if they're acting out a play, and there's nothing authentic there. There's nothing real. It's like they've learnt this off by heart, and every movement is just going in. I don't want that. I want to see the real person.
And with you, Frank, that comes across really well, because you have this tremendous sense of humor, and you're always, maybe that's part of, the Antipodean self-depreciating humor or something like that. But the real Frank turns up literally from minute 1 and all the way to minute 10. And I think that's why you're so successful, because people can feel they know you, and you're actually predictable in your style, and people appreciate that, right? Which really takes me to my point number 4. And this is a little bit of a longer one, so keep me on track here, because
when 4 or 3 that we're on.
3 was authentic.
That's 4, authentic. Now we're on 4.
Is that every meeting, even the follow-up meetings, even if it's a second or a third meeting, needs to have these 3 parts. And it's obviously quite obvious that there needs to be an intro. Then number 2, there needs to be a body, and number 3, there needs to be a conclusion. Let me explain each of those in turn, because every intro is critical to the meeting, and this is the only part of a meeting, right? I'm not talking about a speech here, but a meeting that I believe you should script, you should practice it, get feedback, and memorize it. I used to just wing it all the time, because I thought, I'm so bulletproof that you can throw anything at me, and I would have audiences of 3,000-4,000 people, and I would just go out there and wing it. And most of the time I got away with it, but I could have been so much better if I had just scripted and practiced my introduction. Because the important part of that is the time of like maximum nervousness. So when you're right in the beginning of the meeting, that's the time when things can go wrong. That's the time where you might be nervous, but it's also the time of maximum judgment, because you never get the opportunity to make a first impression twice, right? So on that first impression, you want to make sure that your intro covers the basics and you have memorized that. The second part is the body and the main discussion of it, right? That is, has to follow the agenda. And the agenda from that point of view is critical because it's laid out. And the third component of the meeting, which is the conclusion or the call to action, that should be the thing that makes sure that you meet the outcomes that you set up in point number 1 above, right? So those are the 3 key ingredients, I think, of every meeting, and you don't just turn up there and wing it. Take it from me. I've done that way too long, and I've blown too many meetings.
And so many people, that third part, they don't do. So what is going to be the next step? We'll get together again in 2 weeks' time. Let's put it in. Not I'm going to give you a call to set up something. You actually firm up and go to the next step from there.
Yeah, I'll cover that again in my point number 10 when I talk about the conclusion. But when I start the meeting, and this is the most difficult part, this is the part that you actually really have to think about, because something strange happens in the world of a financial advisor, or even an insurance salesman or an asset manager coming to see a client. There is something weird that goes on in those meetings, because here you have the person that come in and they immediately start talking about themselves, because it's kind of expected from them, right? Oh, so why are you here to see me? What are we here to discuss? And that puts the financial advisor or the asset manager at a massive disadvantage, right? So the only way that I found to re-engineer that is to design 2, not 1, 2 enrolling and engaging questions right at the beginning. And this part is hard work, because you've actually got to think about it. What question can you pose to your audience or to your counterpart on the other side of the table that will engage them and enroll them into the meeting? Obviously, focusing on what problem they have is the obvious one, but you've got to frame that really, really well, so that the other person on the other side is instantly engaged in your discussion. Because if you control the questions, you control the room, you control the meeting. And I think that is an absolute critical component of setting up a successful meeting, because that then takes me to my point number 6. Can I continue, Frank? I'm on a roll here.
And again, I like that one, because I always used to have started with a big question or a big statement that's going to get them involved straight away.
Yeah. I've seen that you do that in your speeches, by the way. And I think speech training, learning how to become a speaker, is one of the best, uses of money that you can do to get proper speech training. Because if you know how to hold a public speech, you can run a meeting much better, and it's really, really great training. So my secret weapon, my key to all of these kind of meetings is a point that I call validate, then fascinate. Let me explain that. So think of it in a mindset like you're arguing with a teenager, or you're arguing with your wife. Sorry, forget that. You'll never win that.
No.
You're arguing with somebody who's angry with you. Okay, that's the framework those are the glasses, kind of the framework I want you to think about this. The absolute key to all of it is to validate first. Then you can go and fascinate them with your brilliance, with your solutions, with your technology, with your offer, whatever. Because what so many people do is they come in and they try to correct you and convince you. Or they walk in and immediately start talking about themselves, which puts you on the back foot and a disadvantage. But if you have this policy, and I have a meeting planner template that I use to remind me of this: validate first, then fascinate. So coming back to that example, if you're arguing with somebody or somebody's angry with you, even if you disagree with them vehemently, find something to validate them about, so that they feel that they have been genuinely and authentically heard and understood. Because until that happens, people are not listening. It's wah, 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 right? So what I do in that chain is that I acknowledge them for showing up. I acknowledge them and thank them for making that meeting happen and their interest. But I've learned not to thank people for their time, because there's something weird happens when you thank people for their time. It kind of predisposes that your time is not valuable, right? And that you are lower in the food chain. And as Frank and I will tell you, we're both Leos, right? We're at the top of the food chain. So we don't want to negotiate with that at all. But I'm just kind of making fun about that. But when you thank somebody for all the little steps, for responding, for answering a difficult question, whatever, it starts the conditioning. Because you see, all of us, everybody, I don't care who you're talking about, are in some way insecure or sensitive about things. And if somebody is thanking you, it starts kind of that conditioning where it's rewarding the small steps. So as your meeting progresses, you're getting lots of yeses and lots of nodding of their heads. And the best way to do that, validate, then fascinate. That's my secret weapon, right? So point number 7, Frank, I'm trying to stay on target here and not make this a 1 hour long video. I have ETR versus ESP. Now, Laura Louise, who, as you know, has acute acronym disorder, because when you've been in finance for so long, you have acronyms for everything. So these ones are very simple. ETR for me is earn the right, okay? That's where you create your credibility. And if you earn the right to be in that meeting and be taking up other people's oxygen, right? You have created a whole different mousetrap in the meeting, and you need to earn that right. You need to earn their trust and that credibility. And the best way you do that is with ESP, expert sales positioning. So if you have taken steps to earn the right to be in the meeting, your counterpart in the meeting will be listening to you with a very different mindset, so that you can establish that expert sales positioning, whereby you are positioning yourself as their trusted advisor. as their consigliere, as their consultant, as whatever it is, that is a very, very different kind of meeting framework than just walking in and trying to sell something. So that's my point number 7, Frank.
Great. Number 8. What's number 8 for us, Anric?
Whew. Okay. Number 8 is a little esoteric, but I have a reminder on my meeting scheduler that says all the way in every section of the meeting, it says tune into WIFM. So every section, I want to make sure that the radio frequency that I'm tuned into is WIFM, which is another wonderful acronym that stands for what's in it for me. Because I'm trying to fight this problem that we as financial advisors or asset managers or people who are selling things have, we always have this tendency to default back into, talking and taking over the room and talking about us and talking about our products. Literally, people don't care. Absolutely. I'm sorry if there's any snowflakes on this call, but people are not interested in you. They are interested in number one, and they want to talk about number one, and that's themselves. And if you have this mindset to run every frequency and play WIIFM in the background, you will have a meeting that is focused on them, and that where you are forcing yourself to focus on them, serve them, help them, make their lives better. And that really helps with the authenticity trade. And I tell you, life is so much better if you're giving rather than taking. The money will find you if you're just giving, if you're genuinely and authentically giving the way. Take an example from Frank here. He's just always giving, posting, sharing, supporting people. And I think that comes back to find you, which is really nice. Which takes me to my point number 9. This is a natural progression. So I like to pause during meetings and, get comfortable with silence. So before moving to the conclusion or the call to action, right, I pause to formally recognize the value. Let me explain that a little better. I make it an absolute point to almost stop the meeting, and so it gets awkward, and I say, okay, now I would just like to illustrate and recognize the value that you, Mr. Client, are bringing to this meeting. And I list the value that they are bringing to me, to my business, to the day, to whatever was wonderful, how I'm enjoying this, thanking them for the opportunity, not their time. You see what I'm doing? I'm actually kind of validating them. Then I switch to saying, okay, so here is what I am bringing to the meeting, to the table. This is my contribution, and I recognize that, because quite frankly, sometimes people don't recognize how much value you actually bring them. And then once I've done that, I go to the third step where I say, okay, so here is the value that working together will bring. So by working together, we can do this, we can do that, we can create these kind of benefits for your family, for your partners, for your spouse, for your business, for your income, for your safety, security. And I move to talking about the benefit of the benefit. So I'm not just talking about the features of my product or something dry like the benefit of the benefit. The other day, you and I were talking about it, and I think that's a good example to bring up for us old guys in the room. Do you remember in the 90s, Frank, when Michelin did like that advertisements where everybody was so focused on selling tires and the features and the mileage and the cost, right? They had, I have it still somewhere, I can send it to you. They had this advertising campaign that put like this fat little baby in the middle of the tire, right? Do you remember those, Frank?
Yeah, I remember that.
So what they were doing was selling the benefit of the benefit. They didn't need to go into price and costs and compete on price and treadwear and all of this kind of boring stuff. They went straight to, oh, baby. So that the guy buying the tires made that connection. Hey, if I buy Michelin tires, I will not kill my wife's child. You know what I mean? Something like that. Anyway, my wife says I'm very politically incorrect for making jokes like that. But I think it's a great example of selling the benefit of the benefit. But you can only do that if you've acknowledged them, you've tuned the whole meeting to WIFM, you've recognized the value that they're bringing, then you bring forth your value. Then when you're working together, what is the value that working together will bring, right? Because then I stop, and then I formally ask for permission to go to the next step, to move to the conclusion, to move to the offer, to move to the sale, to, you know, I ask for permission. And something really amazing happens when you do that, because people actually don't mind being sold to. People love being marketed to. It's what they hate is being tricked and coerced, and when you're too clever. And by actually formally asking and saying, okay, having discussed all of these, you know, all of these things now, is it okay if we move forward to a blatant sales presentation, because I'd really like to present to you what we do, some of the case studies of how we've helped other people, and what our greatest benefit is. Would that be okay with you at this point? And I tell you, I've never had somebody say no. And when people say yes, something else happens. The meeting gets engaged, right? And you get to this point where they can see where you're taking them. And people like that, where you're leading them where they need to be going, right? And they know it because they now trust you. You say, and because you've created that trust, they trust your steps, and you've laid it out. You said, I'm now going to sell to you, and people go, oh, great, let me get my coffee. Let's watch the show. But something else amazing happens when you ask for permission. It actually gives you the right to ask for feedback and go after that presentation. So what do you think? Is that a good solution for you? What did you like the most about that? And you can ask real questions, because you've done your homework, you've paid your school fees, and you have the right to ask for a decision at that point. But because you've had a lot of decisions along the way going, yes, 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 there's no big yes or no decision at the bottom. It's like, oh yeah, do I want it this way, or do I want it in yellow, or do I want it in blue? You know what I mean? So anyway.
There's a great book at some time called Getting to Yes, where they had all the little yeses that leads to the big yes. And again,
I have not read that, but I've learned it the hard way, I suppose, Frank.
One of the other things that really stuck with me there was pauses, because I teach professional speakers all over the world to present, and also I run video courses for people on how to present on video. And the hardest thing for someone to do is pause, because they just boom, boom, boom. And as a speaker, most speakers get up on stage, and because you're so nervous, you speak at about 100 miles an hour. There's no pauses, and people haven't got time to actually assimilate all of the information that's coming in, you know, and
yeah.
They'll sit there and whoa, slow down, just keep quiet, just let me just regurgitate, let me listen to what you're actually saying.
It is so hard. It really is so hard. And in my early days, Frank, you know, when I was doing direct selling to high net worth investors, man, I think I talked myself out of a deal way after they said yes. So you are preaching to the converted. I think trying to stay quiet is a real discipline that you need to practice, right? So here's how I do it. I built myself little tricks to stop it. Which brings me to my point number 10 of this, is the conclusion. So what I do, this doesn't work for everybody, but I had to do it to myself so that I can stop selling. And I found the need to do this because I would have so many great meetings and they didn't materialize into anything until I got really smart about this. So what I do at the conclusion stage, I pack away everything. I take away all the toys. I take away the laptop. I take away the presentation material. If there's a whiteboard behind me, I clean that up. And then I bring out a piece of paper and a pen, blank piece of paper. And I go, okay, let's just summarize everything that we've decided and agreed. And I go point number 1, point number 2, point number 3, point number 4. And I draw them into it, because this is almost what I'm doing. I'm creating a handshake agreement on paper. We've decided this, we're going to do that, we're going to do that, even if it's negative, even if it's not a fit, right? Because what sometimes happens is that, especially when you're dealing with people with a lot of very big numbers, telephone numbers of money, all the decision makers are not in the same room. And I try and arrange that in advance to make sure that I've scheduled the meeting properly, that all the decision makers are there. But you know what? What's that old saying? We make plans, God laughs, right? It doesn't happen. So there might be a partner who's not in the room. So what I will do by creating the summary, I will essentially be creating almost a heads of agreement where my counterpart will say, oh, look, my partner is not here. He needs to decide on that. I said, I have an even better solution. Why don't I bring your partner up to speed? I will send him a copy of these things that we've discussed together with the supporting documents and the links. And I will make sure that this is what we've discussed. And then I make him sign that little piece of paper or put his little squiggle or smiley face on it so his partner knows that this has been vetted. And then I take that paper, I use an app on my phone called Scan This. I scan it, and before I've left the meeting, everybody's got my meeting notes. And then this is the point that we discussed, right at the beginning, Frank. I never accept a meeting conclusion that says, I'll get back to you. Mm-hmm. That is like literally like somebody keeping you in the air traffic control pattern at Heathrow until you run out of fuel and you crash. It is way better to realize, hey, you know what, we need to do more work here, or we need that, or we need to have another meeting. Let's schedule it right then and there. We take out our phones, we take out our laptops, and we go, okay, I'm available next Tuesday. We can do 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, or 4 o'clock. I can clear out the afternoon for you if we want to do this, because this is really important. And let's not spend another 10 emails trying to find a mutually acceptable time and then 3 phone calls and all this. Let's just decide right now. And then the last thing I do before that, I say, during that meeting, we're going to discuss 1, 2, and 3. I will bring so-and-so. This is what we do. I never accept, I will get back to you, or send me your material, send me your stuff. I mean, I just don't do that. So those are my 10 points, Frank. I could keep going, but I think we might run out of batteries on your phone.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. So for all of you watching, I hope you've picked those up, and you definitely, in sales, you need to be structured. It's very different from the old days. Sales has moved on. In my keynote, the new world of sales, I just speak about how it's changed. The old solution advantage benefits gone. You were speaking about the tire there. You look at any adverts nowadays. If I look at the GoPro adverts, they'll have a 3-legged dog that's running along, and right at the end, they'll just put up GoPro. They don't have to say, we're the best camera out there. Yep. This is our price. It's all in. And what we can do now with technology is bring out the emotions. The things we can use now is after that call, you could actually go back and make a video call. Instead of sending I don't do emails anymore, I do video mails. So I'll record a quick video mail, send it over. Here's the 10 things we discussed. People absolutely love it. It brings out the authentic you. And what you're also doing is you're setting yourself apart from everyone else. And so what is it that you're doing different or better than all of your competitors?
Yeah.
So there we have it.
That I've enjoyed with you, Frank, is I've seen a couple of your videos on LinkedIn marketing, and I thought those were absolutely spot on, right? Because LinkedIn is this terrific kind of environment of 500, 600 million people, right? 72% of which are executives. I'm quoting your statistics, that check it every single day. So, LinkedIn being what is classified as a content poor network versus Facebook that is an over-contentified, is that English? Over-content driven, it's a saturated marketplace. LinkedIn is not yet saturated. So, people following your instructions and your training on LinkedIn, I think that's one of the best uses of time to use, because everybody you want to meet, that you want to reach, is on LinkedIn.
So for all of you watching now, if you want to find out a little bit more about becoming a professional speaker, or you want to see my online courses on video training, LinkedIn training, or technology, just drop me an email, frank@frankfurness.com. Anric, if anyone wants to find out any more about you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
I think probably the best is my advisory and consulting and training website, which is globalfundadvisors.info, not .com, .info. Very, very important. That's probably the best way, because I have a lot of videos like this on there. I teach people a lot of things. That's kind of my way of contributing back to the industry. And you know, we've created a community of about 22,000 people around the world like that are learning from each other, growing from each other. And occasionally you'll see Frank's head popping up there teaching us something. So I think that's probably the best way, globalfundadvisors.info.
So all of you now that have just watched that, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you've picked up some great stuff there. Anric, thanks so much for your time today. It's always awesome speaking to you, and great information.
Excellent, Frank. Thank you so much for being such a great catalyst and helping so many people. That's really, really admirable. I appreciate it.
Great. And let's sign off now.